people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this, our continued coverage of this past weekend's action. The featherweight contest between unbeaten Charis Artingstall, Olympic amateur standout Charis Artingstall, and local lady Lindsey Buczynski. A fight that worked out exactly as I predicted, exactly as I expected. Educated pressure from the southpaw, Charis Artingstall. You hear a lot of buzzwords in boxing. Educated pressure is one among them. What does that really mean, though? Well, early on at the start of the match, you saw Charis Artingstall stepping into her jab. Lindsey immediately gave up ground. Before you knew it, Lindsey's back was on those ropes. Charis Artingstall wasn't stepping so deep into the pocket that she didn't have room to throw. No. She allowed a bit of space between her and Lindsey whilst putting the squeeze on her to get off punches, hard, straight punches, which are her best punches. She can really drive them so long as she has room to throw, and she allowed herself that by not collapsing the pocket and smothering her own work. If you're too close to the opponent, you're not going to have enough room to really drive your shots, drive your punches, and put power on them. Lindsey was in over her head at the very start of this match. A lot of pressure and a lot of spite from the Olympic amateur standout Charis Artingstall. Lindsey staying on the perimeter of the ring, moving lateral, trying to create distance between herself and Charis, who was staying on top of her. Lindsey was trying for counter shots that really weren't finding a home. Good survival instincts, though, in terms of offense. She couldn't get Charis's respect, which she was lacking. That's what Charis was packing. Some amateur standouts need a couple of fights before they develop a good pro style, whereas with Charis, she's kind of already there. She just needs more rounds in the bank. She just needs more fights, needs to be more active. Sharpen her up. You noticed at the start of the rounds, both fighters would be fencing, trying to get their straight shots off, and Charis had a better understanding of her range than Lindsey did, so Charis's punches would actually land. It's that amateur pedigree shining through, the experiences in the amateurs and knowing her range. Very important. She'd immediately back off Lindsey Buczynski, who'd stay on the perimeter of the ring, circling away, back on the ropes. Hanging tough. Charis's best punches are her straight punches, but she's got some pretty good hooks, too, when she steps into the jab, closes the distance, and gets off those hooks mid-range to inside. Very spiteful. Good hooks. Good uppercuts. She's mean. Ugh. To Lindsey Buczynski's credit, she knew she was outgunned, so she'd instinctively shell up, tuck those elbows, and hope for the best, trying to mitigate the damage. Prevent as much as she can from getting in. Though in effect sacrificing the rounds as she was being outworked by Charis Artingstall in what was a 4-rounder. Couple more rounds, you never know. Charis might have got through with some hard shots. Maybe she stops this broad. Maybe. It's what these developmental fights are all about. Allowing the blue chip prospect to develop in a controlled environment, in what was a controlled fight against an opponent that can offer up some resistance, though not too much. Opposite the ring of Lindsey Buczynski, the assignment is applying educated pressure and finding the holes in the guard, capitalizing off those opportunities against a less than ambitious opponent who's focused on surviving. You want to break through. Punches under the elbow, uppercuts up the middle, shots around the guard, or straight punches that punch through it. The goal here is breaking the opponent down, or at minimum, thoroughly outworking the opponent. I think Charis Artingstall, I think she did a little bit of both, but it's just a 4-rounder. She did a good job. I really like Charis Artingstall. I see a champion. I see a part of the next wave of champions in the women's featherweight division the day that Amanda Serrano finally decides to hang them up. Charis Artingstall will be a force to be reckoned with. The next wave of featherweights, what could be the next line of champions. Now, post-fight, I saw Charis Artingstall say something about wanting to be more active. This year, I think that she will be. Her significant other, Lauren Price, she already saw action once. She was in action a little over a week ago, and she's already got her next fight date lined up for the undercard of Joshua Buatsi's next fight. I imagine that young Charis is on a similar schedule, and maybe she'll be in action on that undercard, or perhaps the undercard of Richard Riakpor's next fight. Somebody else. Congratulations to Charis Artingstall for advancing to a professional record of 3 wins, no losses, and no draws. Could be 4-0 soon. They just need to get her back out there. She's the goods. Yeah. In other news, a startling bit of information, it appears that Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. may be back on, and it's close to being announced for June 3rd in Abu Dhabi. In spite of the BBBOC attempting to hold Conor Benn's feet to the fire due to adverse finding in his VADA tests, that doesn't stop him from fighting, and that doesn't stop his fights from catering to a British audience. If anybody's interested in a Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. fight, it would be the Brits.
Primarily, yeah.
Question is, how interested are they right now? Chris Eubank Jr. is coming off a shock upset loss to Liam Smith. He was stopped in that fight. He was knocked out.
He had the option to run it back. I guess he's not going to.
Not based on this, and surely that affects this fight's marketability to some degree. The fight was a lot more intriguing before, whereas Chris seems a lot more human now. And the contracted weight for the match, are they still gonna
catch weight this guy? Rehydration clause this guy?
Surely the terms of engagement will have changed since that initial snafu.
And is Matchroom still thinking about billing this fight as a box office fight? A pay-per-view for the Brits.
You gotta wonder if they still intend to do that. I don't think they mean to bill this fight as a pay-per-view for me and you here stateside, but in the United Kingdom, are they still gonna bill this fight as a box office fight? Questions that need answers.
Chris don't want to run it back with Liam, likely because he stands to make more money opposite the ring Conroy than Liam.
You notice where the fight is being held? Abu Dhabi.
They likely want to do this fight as part of their Champions Series in that region of the world, a partnership between Matchroom and the tourism folks over there in Abu Dhabi to bring big-time boxing to that region of the world.
They kicked off that partnership with the tourism folks over there in Abu Dhabi last year with that Dimitri Bivol versus Zerto Ramirez fight.
It's an ongoing partnership.
I don't think this fight has the same sizzle that it did before. And I don't think this fight is quite as marketable as it was. I dare say that Kell Brook would have been a more adequate choice for Conor Benn's next fight than Chris. Chris should have at least been allowed the chance to rebound off that Liam Smith fight.
That loss.
Here you have Conor go in there with former IBF champion Kell Brook. Kell Brook was plotting a ring return. He means to return to action. Both Kell and Conor, they've been out of action a while.
That would have made more sense to me, but it is what it is.
Perhaps he can take on Kell Brook afterwards. And you know, if Chris Eubank Jr., if he's not running it back with Liam Smith, that opens up Liam Smith's schedule to have other fights. Maybe he can fight Kell Brook.
I vaguely recall some mention of a Liam Smith versus Gennady Golovkin fight at middleweight. Maybe he can have that fight.
Sky Sports and Boxer can pay for it. In spite of Gennady Golovkin not being a champion anymore, his name still holds some value enough, I think, that you could do a fight between him and Liam in the United Kingdom, and it'll sell.
Yeah, I think.
Gennady Golovkin hasn't officially retired. He certainly isn't the same fighter that he used to be. He's on the back nine, twilight years of his career, an optimal time for Liam Smith to rack up another high-profile victory. He's gained momentum.
He keeps winning. Maybe he gets himself a title shot at middleweight.
Whether he ends up fighting Kell Brook or Gennady Golovkin in his very next fight, one fight that I think is a distinct possibility is a potential Yanibek Alimkhanulai fight. Yanibek, who's supposed to be fighting Canada's own Stephen Butler, I'm going to go ahead and say that Yanibek stops that guy.
Yeah.
If he does, the network relationship exists between Top Rank and the people over there at Sky Sports to ways you could make such a fight happen. Maybe you outsource Yanibek to the United Kingdom as a defending champion. Maybe you have him fight Liam Smith over there, though we are getting ahead of ourselves. The crux of it is,
if Chris Eubank Jr. is fighting Conor Benn next, he's not fighting Liam Smith.
and that must be what the delay has been in announcing that rematch between Chris and Liam. And Lil Birdie must have won in Chris's ear that he can make substantial coin boxing Conor Benn, going through with that fight that does nothing for Conor Benn.
You can make some money with the fight, you understand, but in terms of legacy,
Doesn't mean a whole lot. Conor Benn is still subject to a lot of scrutiny as a result of the adverse finding in his VADA tests ahead of what was supposed to be this fight last year. He's done very little to prove his innocence.
convince people he's innocent.
That appearance on the Piers Morgan show seems to have done more harm than good, but he's not going to let that stop him, and neither is Chris Eubank Jr. Chris seems less concerned with Conor Benn's adverse finding.
More concerned with getting paid.
I remember when all of this first went down, there were reports indicating that Chris Eubank Jr. still intended to go ahead with the fight in spite of that adverse finding, and all these months later,
That seems to be the case.
so it looks like Chris Eubank Jr. is ready to cash out.
You don't want to run it back with Liam. He doesn't want to avenge the loss. He'd rather make money opposite the ring, kinda Ben.
He loses this fight like he lost the last one. I don't imagine Chris Eubank Jr. is going to stick around the sport of boxing much longer.
I don't.
Then again, Chris was never all that ambitious in his boxing career to begin with. Most of the accord he got was due to his namesake.
Take the Eubank Jr. name out of it and tell me, based on his career, that we'd even know who this guy is.
Based on ability, his boxing ability, and his career so far, tell me he'd be the same high-profile guy if his last name weren't Eubank.
Of course not.
You know the answer. In spite of everything that's happened, the adverse finding in Conor Benn's VADA tests, that shock knockout loss to Liam Smith, Chris Eubank Jr.
Looks like he's cashing out to me.
It's what it looks like. Finally, on the heels of his big win this past weekend, David Benavidez says, I told you I was going to put a beating on Caleb Plant. That's exactly what I did.
Mixed reviews, mixed feelings about how good or how good he didn't perform.
The main thing is that I wanted to be patient, Benavidez said. I mean, Caleb Plant is a great counterpuncher, as you can see. He's really fast. I didn't want to just go in there and then get countered with any shots, you know? I really had to take my time. I think you guys seen a good jab. My jab was way more effective than Caleb Plant's. You guys were only talking about Caleb Plant having a more better jab and stuff like that. But as soon as I got in there, you know, the fight is not 4 or 6 round fight. It's a 12 round fight, you know? So you got to start slow. But as soon as I found my groove, there was nothing he could do to stop me, you know? I hurt him to the body, hurt him to the head, cut the ring off pretty good. And like I said, I'm just satisfied with this. There's a lot of things I can fix in my game.
David's talking about how efficient and effective his jab was, but
David Benavidez wasn't showing much of a jab in this fight, and it's for that reason that Caleb Plant was constantly able to smother.
That's why he was able to hit and hold so much, because David Benavidez wasn't jabbing his way in.
There's a lot of things that I can fix in my game, but overall I'm satisfied with this. This is my first fight on pay-per-view. This is the biggest fight I've ever been in. The biggest fight of my life. And I feel like I did amazing, you know? I mean, I went out there, I told you I was going to put a beating on Caleb. That's exactly what I did.
You're telling me Caleb Plant was the biggest fight of your career? The biggest fight of your life?
You would think that these comments from David Benavidez himself, would elicit a little bit more respect for Canelo Alvarez, who not only took on Caleb Plant before David, but he actually closed the show. He actually stopped Caleb.
David didn't.
Over a year ago, Canelo Alvarez knocked this guy out in the 11th round, so that over a year later, David Benavidez can tell you this is the biggest fight of his life, the biggest fight of his career, and he doesn't knock the guy out.
How many guys did you see in the last calendar year? How many guys did you see in the last 12 months calling Canelo Alvarez's undisputed run weak?
Caleb Plant was a part of that undisputed run, the final puzzle piece. And how many of those same guys who called Canelo Alvarez's undisputed run weak are now telling you that this guy's a monster for going a distance with Caleb?
Make it make sense.
I don't know if you guys seen it, Benavidez said, but I hit him with a body shot and I heard him go, ugh. And I told him, I heard you. I told him, I heard you. You know, that's what changed everything. That was in round 4. And from there, it was just...
Maybe he did hurt him in the 4th round, but that didn't stop him from going 12.
I just kept hitting him with body shots, kept hitting him with hard shots. I know I'm the harder puncher. That's what I've told you guys. I've said it over and over again. Everybody I've been in the ring with, I've hurt. Everybody since I was 14 years old. And that's something that nobody can take away from me. I know I got that power, you know? And if somebody pushes me to the limit like that, I get even stronger.
Maybe, but he didn't stop the guy.
Most people are pointing to Caleb Plant's excessive holding as the reason that David Benavidez was unable to stop him. David himself said, if Bayless would have said something about the clinches, maybe I would have clipped Plant.
Yeah, maybe. And maybe the cucumbers taste better pickled. The bottom line is, you didn't close the show.
I don't want to throw Kenny Bayless under the bus, Benavidez said during his post-fight press conference, but you know, he didn't call Caleb Plant out in any of the clinches he was doing the whole fight, you know? I think if Kenny Bayless would have said something about the clinches, you know...
Different referees got different refereeing styles.
Different ways of officiating a fight, thus you can't rely on the referee all the time. At some point, you're gonna have to take matters into your own hands.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't call Caleb Plant out on any of the clinches he was doing the whole fight, you know? I think if Kenny Bayless would have said something about the clinches, you know, maybe it would have stopped Caleb from trying to clinch, and I would have clipped him.
The real reason that Caleb was able to consistently smother David Benavidez wasn't because of Kenny Bayless so much as David wasn't jabbing his way in.
David was marching forward in a high guard, then letting go of college frat boy punches, wide sweeping ones that Caleb Plant would either get under or around, then spoil. then smother.
You say that Kenny Bayless should have said something about it, but Kenny Bayless, he refereed a lot of Mayweather fights, didn't he?
Floyd Mayweather, in his time, he was notorious for smothering guys, clinching when the situation called for it.
I wonder if the same guys who are now complaining about Caleb Plant's excessive holding were complaining when Floyd used to do that.
Or Andre Ward, yet another fighter who often resorted to hitting and holding.
Vladimir Klitschko, he reigned as a unified champion for a number of years behind the jab and grab.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little disappointed I didn't get the stoppage, Benavidez said, but you know, you guys seen how his face looked, you know? He was really bloody, and I was really imposing my will. I really beat him up really good, and like I said, I'm not really satisfied because I didn't get the knockout, but this is a great way to get a victory, you know? It's a dominating performance. It was a great performance. There's a lot of things I can tweak in my game to make sure I get the stoppage next time.
You can't put it on Kenny Bayless. This guy kept spoiling.
It was established early on in this fight that if Caleb Plant can't find an exit, he's going to spoil. He's going to smother.
Early.
And it was established that it didn't seem to bother Kenny Bayless all that much. Coincidentally, that's Kenny Bayless's officiating style. He officiated a lot of Mayweather fights where there was a lot of holding.
The onus to prevent that guy from tying you up is on you, not Kenny.
Kenny can break up those clinches whenever they happen, though deducting a point is at his discretion, and if you see it's not bothering that guy, it's up to you to do something about it.
Moreover, it's your fault they're happening,
Not Kenny's. David Benavidez is a very crude, albeit effective, pressure fighter, marching forward in a high guard and trying for big shots as soon as he closes the gap, but they're sweeping shots, wide shots.
Wide enough for Caleb to get under them and spoil.
And what that really speaks to is a lack of variety, a lack of adequate shot selection from David Benavidez. He's not showing you a short double jab on his way in to keep the other guy's guns holstered while you close the gap.
A short double jab that's hard to counter.
Short double jab to keep the guy's earmuffs on while you try to get close to him.
David wasn't doing that, and because of that, that's why Caleb was able to constantly tie him up.
I'll go as far as saying that if not for Caleb Plant gassing out and getting tired,
We all knew he was going to.
David Benavidez's best weapon. It's not his combinations, it's not his shot selection, it's his gas tank, it's his engine. He was able to effectively outlast Caleb Plant, though he didn't always look good doing it. He looked quite limited.
Caleb Plant not being the biggest puncher, whatever punches he did land, they didn't get David's respect. No one expected them to.
It was a battle of attrition more than anything else, and you can't fault Kenny Bayless for your shortcomings as a boxer.
He's tying you up because you're letting him.
Kenny Bayless is too, but that's tel demage for Kenny Bayless. That's expected.
You expect that from him. That's probably why he was there.
The bottom line is there's ways to deal with a guy who's clearly hitting and holding.
There are.
David was coming up short of answers. He didn't rack up a highlight reel knockout like Canelo Alvarez did, put simply, because he ain't the boxer that Canelo is. Ain't got the ring savvy, the ring IQ. The variety of punches and punch placement, the shot selection, what you throw and when you throw it.
You ain't got it.
That's the real reason he couldn't stop this guy. That's why he couldn't knock him out.